The sterile hallways of the corporate headquarters echoed with the rhythmic clack of high heels against polished floors. Charlotte Sinclair, the CEO, strode past clusters of employees who parted like the Red Sea, their eyes flickering with a mix of reverence and fear. She scanned the room, her presence a commanding force that seemed to suck the air out of the space. But today, her attention was elsewhere. At the far end, behind a security desk cluttered with expired coffee mugs and lost keys, stood Marco Reyes. A single dad and the company's night security guard, he diligently monitored the screens before him, his brow knitted in focus. Despite the monotony of his job, Marco carried himself with an understated dignity, his eyes revealing a depth of struggle and resilience that resonated with those who noticed. Charlotte's gaze narrowed as she caught sight of him. She had long viewed him as an inconvenience, someone beneath her notice, a mere cog in her corporate machine. But today, something compelled her to observe. The quiet intensity of Marco's work seemed at odds with the disdainful way she dismissed him, and that dissonance intrigued her. As she turned to leave, a flicker of nervous energy sparked in Marco, sending her instincts on high alert. What was he hiding? Marco Reyes sat behind the security desk, a small fort of gray cubicles and fluorescent lights. The night shift weighed heavily on his weary shoulders, but he wore his fatigue like a well-fitted jacket, familiar and expected. Each click of the camera feeds was a reminder that the world continued to turn outside, even if he felt trapped within these walls. A simple man, Marco's existence was defined by routine and responsibility. Every evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, he slipped into a uniform that felt less like armor and more like a shackle, a symbol of the sacrifices he'd made. His apartment, a modest one-bedroom on the outskirts of the city, held remnants of a life that once thrummed with joy. Framed pictures of his daughter, Lily, smiled down from the walls, her laughter echoing in his mind. He remembered the sacrifices he made to ensure she could pursue her dreams, to show her that hard work bore fruit. Every dollar earned through sporadic overtime was a testament to his love, a compass guiding him through the darkness of single parenthood. But with each passing day, the weight of financial struggle pressed harder. He feared he might lose not just the job but also the very sense of stability he fought to maintain for Lily. Marco's eyes darted between the screens, each image revealing shadows of late-night workers and reflected ambitions. An indistinct ache pooled in his chest as he contemplated the faceless figures hustling in a world he seemed forever outside of. Yet, in those moments of silent observation, he found strength, a flicker of hope that if he held on long enough, something would change. He thrived on the quiet victories, the simple gratitude from coworkers who needed help or the smile from Lily when he finally made it home. Despite the long nights that blurred into mornings, he embraced each breath as a chance to do better for her, even if it meant remaining invisible in the big machine of corporate machinery. In stark contrast, Charlotte Sinclair was a powerhouse on the move, a figurehead gliding through those corporate hallways with the kind of grace that turned heads. She was a woman built of ambition and relentless drive, having clawed her way to the top amid a sea of doubters and cynics. Charlotte had honed her skills like a blade, cutting through barriers with every calculated decision and impassioned speech that lit up conference rooms. Yet, the success she flaunted felt like gilded armor, hiding a void that echoed within her, the loneliness of the throne she had crafted for herself. There was a price to pay for Charlotte's ambition, a personal wound that festered beneath her polished surface. The ceaseless quest for validation had left her isolated, surrounded by accolades yet devoid of true connection. The high-pitched laughter at corporate galas rang hollow in her ears, the endless validations from peers felt like whispers just out of reach. She had sacrificed friendships and family ties on the altar of her career, believing that each conquest would fill her soul, only to find that the deeper she delved into success, the emptier she felt. In the quiet moments when the spotlight dimmed and the crowds dispersed, Charlotte wrestled with her own discontent. Was the image she cultivated truly who she was, or merely a reflection of the power she wielded? As she paced through the halls, her thoughts became a cacophony of ambition versus fulfillment, a haunting duet that never ceased. There was a sense that something vital was missing, a whisper of humility that contrasted her fierce persona, a longing for something deeper than corporate accolades. When Charlotte spotted Marco, something shifted within her. The quiet strength emanating from his solitary post stirred a feeling she had long suppressed, curiosity. What stories did his worn hands hold? What sacrifices colored his evenings under the flickering lights? For the first time, she felt drawn to someone who lived in the shadows of her world, someone who seemed untouched by the very ambitions that had cost her so much. Intrigued, she decided to follow him, a rare moment of spontaneity ignited by that subtle tension between her confidence and the vulnerability she rarely acknowledged. As she trailed behind his deliberate movements, Charlotte wrestled with her thoughts, surprised that her mind was filled with questions and not the usual cold calculations. The narrative of their world seemed to intertwine at that moment, leaving her to ponder what lay beneath the surface of their contrasting lives. She was driven by a lingering spark of suspicion. What could a night security guard, a man such as Marco, possibly hide? This unexpected intersection of their lives was fraught with unanticipated revelations, and the truth, she sensed, would be unsettling. As Charlotte approached Marco's desk, the tension in the air thickened, an electric current that compelled her forward yet left her hesitant. The stern look on her face betrayed the confusion swirling within. She had never intended to find herself in this position, standing close to someone she had disregarded for so long. But the precarious atmosphere of corporate urgency called for action. A crisis had arisen at the headquarters, a potential security breach threatening the integrity of their latest product launch. It was her responsibility as CEO to address it swiftly, and she found herself uncharacteristically reliant on the very man she had overlooked. "Marco," she said, her tone clipped and devoid of warmth, "we've detected unauthorized access attempts in the main server room. I need you to check the feeds immediately to see if there's anything unusual." The words fell from her lips like daggers, cutting through the usual corporate pleasantries. Despite her brusque demeanor, she found it difficult to meet his gaze, a flicker of uncertainty crossing her mind. His eyes, deep set with shadows of experience, reflected an unyielding calmness that unsettled her. "Absolutely, Miss Sinclair," Marco replied, his voice steady and measured. He hesitated only for a moment before leaning towards the bank of monitors, fingers dancing across the keyboard with practiced ease. Charlotte watched, irritation simmering beneath her surface. She had expected him to fumble or hesitate, an opportunity to remind him of his place amid the chaos of the higher echelons of corporate life. Instead, he worked with a precision that spoke volumes about his experience and capability, peeling away the layers of her assumptions. As the images flickered across the screens, Marco's brow furrowed, his focus unwavering. "There's a pattern here," he murmured, eyes darting with purpose. The attempts coincide with the late-night shifts, but they appear to originate from within the building. The revelation hung between them, and Charlotte felt a prick of recognition, a shift in her perception of the man she had dismissed. This was no ordinary security guard. Marco operated with a shrewd awareness that belied his humble title. "Are you suggesting that someone inside the building is," she hesitated for dramatic effect, "compromising security?" The thought sent a ripple of anxiety through her core. There was a desperate urgency to her question, an instinct to protect what was rightfully hers. But as she studied Marco's composed demeanor, a strange respect began to unfurl within her. This wasn't just a man who stood guard, he was a helmsman navigating uncharted waters, ready to steer her company through the storm. He nodded slowly, his gaze still fixed on the screens. "I believe so. Given the timing and access points, it is likely an employee familiar with the system. We need to act quickly before they can execute their plan." As he spoke, something vulnerable flickered in his eyes, a hint of a past filled with shadows and whispers. Charlotte felt an unusual impulse to lean closer, to pry open the layers of his life that he guarded like a fortress. Who was he, really? The notion rippled through her, causing her to re-evaluate the walls she had fortified around herself. But Charlotte couldn't afford to be distracted. The crisis loomed larger than the man before her, and her instinctual dismissal resurfaced. "Thank you, Marco, but I'll handle this with corporate leadership. Just keep monitoring." She felt the words slip out, wielded as a shield against the unexpected connection. But her heart raced with unanswered questions. What if he was right? What if the vulnerability she had overlooked concealed a fortitude that could break through her corporate veneer? Marco stiffened, the tension in his posture evident as he processed her words. But instead of arguing or retreating, he pushed back. "Respectfully, Ms. Sinclair, I think it would be unwise to bypass immediate action. I can help identify the source of the breach." His voice was firm yet calm, laced with a conviction that made Charlotte pause. In that moment, a flicker of vulnerability crossed her own face, a crack in the armor she had carefully assembled. Charlotte found herself weighing his suggestion, the boundaries of their positions blurring in the wake of an impending crisis. Shaking off the wavering doubt, she softened her stance. "All right, Marco. Retrieve the access logs and initiate a search through the internal surveillance. But you'll need to do this discreetly." As she spoke, the tremor in her voice betrayed her authority, and she felt something shift in their dynamic and unexpected partnership emerging from the ashes of her former disdain. As Marco set to work, there was an understanding hanging in the air. There were silent questions, lingering questions that promised to unravel the very fabric of their identities. While Charlotte had chased validation through accolades, Marco had fought for something far deeper, his daughter's future. In that fleeting moment of collaboration, she found herself both reluctant and captivated, drawn into the mysterious depths of a man she had once dismissed so readily. Marco's fingers danced across the keyboard, methodically pulling the access logs from the server. The clatter of keys was punctuated by the soft hum of the fluorescent lights, filling the charged silence between him and Charlotte. She watched him, searching for signs of hesitation that might lend credence to her previous doubts. Yet, the way he navigated the intricate layers of data spoke volumes about his competence, an ironic contrast to her initial perception of him. "Here," Marco said, his voice steady as he pulled up the surveillance footage from the past few nights. "Let's retrace these access attempts." He clicked on the timeline, and the muted images on the screen flickered to life, revealing an intricate web of activity. "Look at this timestamp," he noted, highlighting a shadow moving through the restricted areas after hours. The figure was cloaked in darkness, the identity hidden by the grainy footage. "If we can connect it to an employee's keycard swipe, we'll have our culprit." Charlotte leaned closer, her curiosity piqued. "You think they're using the cover of night to avoid detection? Clever." Her tone softened slightly, the professional distance eroding as they shared a moment of genuine inquiry. Marco nodded, a ghost of a smile flitting across his features at her acknowledgement. "It's a standard tactic in security breaches. They think they can hide in the shadows." "Then why don't we?" she offered, a spark of determination igniting in her chest. "Let's watch the footage together. Cross-reference the times of the unauthorized access with the employee schedules. We can narrow down the suspects." Marco looked at her, surprise mingling with admiration in his gaze. "That's actually a solid plan," he replied, his voice imbued with newfound respect. "I didn't think you'd be willing to dig into the details." Her brow lifted in challenge, perhaps she had underestimated him as much as he had perceived her. "I might surprise you." They settled into their roles, Charlotte pulling up the employee roster while Marco matched it against the timestamps. It felt different now, this shared purpose, like they were weaving together a tapestry of insight, with each thread contributing to a singular goal. As they delved deeper, the tension slowly morphed into camaraderie. "It's interesting," Charlotte mused, eyes still fixed on the screen. "You notice everything that goes on around here, Marco. It's like you have this sixth sense about people." He paused, contemplating her words. "It comes with the territory. When you're a single dad, every little detail matters, especially when you're trying to provide for a little girl." Her heart softened at the vulnerability in his admission, a stark reminder of the reality she often shielded herself from. "You're sacrificing a lot," she said quietly, the weight of her own ambitions suddenly feeling heavy in the air. "What's your biggest fear?" Marco took a deep breath, a cautious pause hanging between them. "Not being there for Lily when she needs me the most. Losing everything I've fought for." The raw honesty in his words caused Charlotte to reflect on her own sacrifices. "I know that feeling," she admitted, "though I fear it's for different reasons." The silence that followed was thick with unspoken understanding. As they resumed their work, Charlotte felt the chill of isolation receding, replaced by something unfamiliar yet invigorating, an alliance born from mutual respect rather than authority. Their difference began to weave together, a delicate dance of trust that became evident in their collaborative efforts. Hours flew by in a whirlwind of data and shared glances, and the initial urgency evolved into a rhythm of teamwork. When they finally zeroed in on a suspect, a junior developer whose access logs matched the times of the breaches, Marco couldn't help but grin. "I think we have our guy." Charlotte mirrored his excitement, though a part of her was wary of what lay ahead. "Let's confront him together," she suggested, surprising them both with her newfound willingness to include him in the decision-making. "You know the security protocols better than I do. I'll handle the confrontation." Marco nodded, the trust solidifying in their exchange. As they prepared to move forward, Charlotte felt a quiet transformation taking root within her, a realization that the pursuit of success didn't have to exist in the vacuum she had created. In this moment of collaboration, side by side with someone she had once dismissed, she glimpsed the beauty in shared purpose. Together, they were no longer just a CEO and a security guard, they had become allies, navigating the unknown, bound by the delicate threads of their intertwined lives. Marco Reyes sat quietly behind the security desk, flickering images from the surveillance feeds illuminating his fatigued features. He scanned the footage with the precision that came from years of dedication not only to his job but to the intricate web of life he had woven with his daughter, Lily. As he worked, memories of his past washed over him like waves, each one carrying a lesson learned through loss and pain. Years ago, Marco had been a promising software developer, enmeshed in the bustling and vibrant tech scene of the city. His passion for coding had burned brightly, illuminating what he thought would be a path paved with endless opportunities. He had graduated at the top of his class, brimming with ambition and surrounded by friends who shared his dreams. They had envisioned a world where their ideas would flourish, where financial security would be a byproduct of their brilliance. But just as the tides of fortune shifted, so too did his life. When Lily was born, the joy she brought was immeasurable, eclipsing the ambitions that had once defined him. But joy was tinged with heartache. Shortly after her arrival, the unexpected loss of his wife shattered their family. The woman who had once been a beacon of light in their lives, a partner in both love and aspirations, was suddenly gone, leaving Marco alone to navigate the storm of grief while raising a newborn. The dreams he once cultivated began to fade, buried under the weight of responsibility and sorrow. As months turned into years, his aspirations succumbed to the harsh reality of life as a single father. He accepted the job as a night security guard purely out of necessity, an opportunity that afforded him the flexibility to raise Lily during the day while still earning enough to keep a roof over their heads. The late night shifts stretched endlessly, each hour embedding deeper into his weary bones. With every passing day, he found himself falling further away from the man he had once been, reducing the brilliance of his career to echoing memories of what could have been. Marco often reminisced about the camaraderie he'd shared with fellow developers, the thrill of collaborative brainstorming sessions, and the joy of actualizing ideas into software that made lives easier. In stark contrast, nights spent alone in the stillness of the corporate building fed into a quiet anger that simmered beneath the surface, an anger not directed outward but inward, a gathering storm of regret. He once had a voice, once fought tooth and nail to be heard, but now it felt as if he had willingly silenced it, fading into the sterile backdrop of corporate neglect. Yet, even in his diminished world, Marco never wavered in his commitment to Lily. Every sacrifice he made was a brick laid in the foundation of her future. He worked tirelessly to instill a sense of resilience in her, to show her that every struggle held the potential for growth, that success was not defined by wealth or prestige, but by the love and strength forged through adversity. His heart swelled with pride each time she excelled at school, each smile a reminder of the joy that could still exist amidst painful memories. But there was a quiet discontent lingering beneath the love, a haunting whisper of lost potential. At times, he would gaze at the mirror and search for the man he used to be, the one who had dreams interlaced with passion. And there he would find the faint reflection of hope, a spirit still flickering despite the obstacles life had thrown his way. It was this flicker that drove him forward, a unified resolve to shield Lily from the burdens of his past while fostering a brighter tomorrow. When Charlotte approached the security desk earlier that day, it had stirred something within him, something he hadn't felt in years. Amidst the corporate machine, she embodied the success he had long renounced and yet seemed as lost as he felt within her glossy exterior. The power and ambition she wielded felt like both a distant memory of his former self and an uncharted path he had chosen to forego. Beneath his humble facade, he felt an unsettling curiosity about her life, pondering the sacrifices she must have made to ascend the corporate ladder, just as he had in his own way. As the screens flickered with evidence of the unfolding breach, Marco seized the opportunity to bridge the gap between their worlds. Their connection was fragile yet energizing, a promise of awakening something dormant within both of them. In his heart, he sensed a shift, a possibility of newfound purpose beyond the confines of his current role. And as the nascent alliance began to take shape, he could only hope that it would unearth a shared journey of redemption, illuminating paths that had long remained hidden in the shadows of fear and regret. Meanwhile, Charlotte Sinclair was immersed in her thoughts as she watched Marco work, his quiet strength resonating against the backdrop of her own tumultuous climb. Each keystroke marked a decision made, not just for her company but for herself. And in that moment of mutual regard, a realization began to unfurl. Perhaps success was not simply about validation garnered from high-status accolades, but rather about recognizing the humanity that connected them both in ways they had yet to fully grasp. The truth that hung between them was palpable. Marco, with his deeply rooted sense of purpose, held the power to evoke compassion within Charlotte, forcing her to confront the emptiness she often masked with her ambition. And with every carefully orchestrated step towards uncovering the breach, they not only unwrapped the layers of the mystery but also slowly peeled back their own truths, inching toward a revelation that could fortify their respective journeys for the better. The tension in the air crackled with urgency as Charlotte and Marco huddled over the security feeds, their attention riveted to the flickering screens. The shadowy figure they had identified loomed larger now, and Charlotte couldn't shake the gnawing sensation that this breach was just the tip of the iceberg. "We need to inform the board now," she said, her voice steady with the conviction that came from newfound collaboration. Marco nodded but hesitated, feeling a swell of dread rise within him. "I understand the urgency, but are you sure it's right to bring everyone into this? What if the perpetrator is someone we trust?" His brow furrowed with the weight of his concerns, and Charlotte recognized the cautious edge in his tone. "I can't keep this to myself, it's too significant. If we don't act quickly, we risk everything," she countered, her eyes locking onto his. But as his gaze held firm, she felt the stirring of doubt bubbling beneath her resolve. Why was he hesitant? Was it really caution, or was he protective of the vulnerabilities they had exposed in one another? "Sometimes," Marco began, voice steady despite the chaos, "trusting the wrong people can lead to ruin. I've learned that the hard way." The words escaped him, layered with unguarded weight. In that moment, Charlotte sensed an undercurrent of his pain, a subtle admission that peeled back the protective layers he had built around himself. "What do you suggest then? We wait? We risk losing everything because of this?" Her heart raced as she sought a solution, a way to bridge their views. The realization dawned that she had demanded swift action for herself without considering the burdens he carried, burdens that stemmed from loyalty and loss. "I say we investigate further before alerting anyone," Marco replied, a firm resolve anchoring his tone. "We need proof. That's all I've ever sought to provide for Lily, a foundation rooted in certainty." Charlotte felt a flush of admiration for his unwavering resolve to protect both his daughter and now this company. It was a reminder that their differing motivations didn't have to divide them, perhaps they could meld into something greater. Taking a deep breath, Charlotte shifted her approach. "All right. Let's gather more evidence first, but if we find anything substantial," she let the implication linger, recognizing the implicit value in what Marco was championing. Empathy began to unfurl within her, an urge to ensure that those who lived within the shadows of the corporate structure were heard. As they worked together in silence, a newfound bond solidified between them. Strange as it was, Charlotte began to see the strength in Marco's quiet determination, and in turn, she felt emboldened. She could help those like him, people whose sacrifices went unnoticed in the corporate hierarchy, and perhaps they could change the landscape together, a network of allies forged through their vulnerabilities. When Marco finally pulled up the last piece of evidence, the timestamps connected to their suspect's card swipe were undeniable. "If we expose this now, we can protect people like us, who feel trapped in their positions," he said, passion igniting in his voice. Charlotte felt a rush of purpose as she recognized the power of their combined insights. "Then let's confront him with this evidence together," she agreed, a new fire igniting in her determination. As they prepared to face the suspect, Charlotte realized the weight of her old ways was beginning to lift. No longer solely focused on public validation or the accolades that had once consumed her, she had found herself wrapped in the warmth of genuine partnership and mutual strength. Together, they were poised not merely to defend their work but to redefine it, one step closer toward building a culture that celebrated resilience rather than isolation. In that moment, standing side by side, they realized they were more than just a CEO and a security guard. They had transformed into something more profound, advocates for each other and for their shared vision of a workplace that celebrated humanity over hierarchy. Whatever lay ahead in confronting their foe, they were limber in their newfound bond, ready to embrace the challenges with emotional maturity and courage as they braced for the confrontation that could shape their destinies. The tension in the air had thickened into a tangible force as Charlotte and Marco stood at the threshold of confronting their suspect. The dimly lit corridor outside the security office echoed with the flickering glow of overhead lights, an eerie reminder of the world they were about to navigate together. As they walked side by side, Charlotte couldn't shake the feeling that this moment was more than about the breach. It was a testament to the uncharted waters of connection that had formed between them. Marco's shoulders radiated a quiet confidence, a stark contrast to the doubt that had once clouded Charlotte's mind. The path ahead was uncertain, fraught with the remnants of her ambition, but as they approached the door, she caught a glimpse of his resolve in the way he carried himself. He was a father first, a protector, and in that unassuming strength, Charlotte felt a flicker of her own long-buried values stirring awake. As they reached the door, Marco paused, turning to meet her gaze. The moment stretched, an unspoken understanding passing between them. "No matter what happens in there, just remember, what you do matters," he said softly, the weight of his words underscoring the gravity of their mission. He placed a hand on the door, ready to push it open, but Charlotte noticed something, a subtle tremor in his fingers, a fleeting vulnerability that tugged at her heart. Before they stepped inside, she reached out and lightly touched his arm, a gesture that transcended their roles. "We'll face this together," she reassured him, the sincerity in her voice grounding both of them in the storm of uncertainty. A brief moment passed, and in that shared glance, each saw a reflection of the burdens they carried, one heart heavy with responsibility, the other keenly aware of the necessity of trust. It was just a simple motion, yet it spoke volumes, as if they had exchanged promises of resilience threaded through with compassion. Marco nodded, a hint of gratitude in his eyes, and with a quiet breath, they stepped into the room together. As they entered, a nearby employee's desk was cluttered with family photos, a child's drawing taped to the edge, colorful and innocent. It was a reminder of what they both fought for, the heart of their struggles illuminating the darkness ahead. Charlotte took a fleeting look at the drawing and felt an unexpected warmth, an echo of hope that reverberated in her chest. In that moment, she understood. This was not just about safeguarding the company or their ambitions, it was about protecting the fragile connections that made life worth fighting for. And as they faced the consequences of their choices, she felt a sense of peace settle within her, an assurance that the journey had led her to this moment of clarity, a turning point intertwined with the echoes of their hidden sacrifices. With a final glance at the child's drawing, she stepped forward, ready to embrace whatever awaited them. The air was charged with possibility, and the path ahead, though uncertain, shimmered with the promise of change. In that quiet moment of resolve, they knew they were not alone, bound together by the weight of their shared truths. And as they moved forward, Charlotte felt the stirrings of something profound, a whisper of transformation waiting just beyond the door.